Okay, hi students. This is the beginning of my Unit 5 notes on everything else. Basically, Unit 5, when I started it years ago, I used to give a Unit 5 test. We finished Unit 4 just before spring break. That's the smartest thing I've done in a long time. A lot of my teachers' friends shut down, but I gave you that Unit 4 test the Thursday before break. And that was the smartest thing. And that is why I didn't have to work you as hard last week as I have worked my Euro and World kids because we were in pretty good position when we went on break. But as soon as we finish Unit 4, we have this unit called Unit 5. And I'm going to go ahead and click here and go on to the next slide. Um, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to come back to this in a minute. And by the way, on my videos, I'm going to be just as disorganized and my jokes will be just about as dumb as they are in class. So here's what the plan is this week. So I'm going to record this Unit 5 lecture. And on Thursday, what we're going to do is we're going to have a Zoom chat. And what I've been doing with World and Euro, because we got to be careful about using Zoom, is I have a waiting room and I'll send out a text and I'll say, okay, letters A through C, get in the, sign up for the Zoom chat. What'll happen is you'll be in the waiting room and I'll bring you in one at a time. So nobody else is going to see, if you mess up really bad. And I'm going to ask you some questions. Now, there's going to be no graphs, and it's not going to be like last week where I let you send me your answers. One kid sent me their answers 2 hours after I gave them to him. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to answer face to face, and hopefully this will work. With AP World and AP European, about 90% of my kids can get this done. And so what we're going to do, because remember this year on the AP Macro essay or exam, you don't have to do any graphs. We think that you're going to have to understand them. You're just not going to turn them in. So we think that they're going to ask you questions, which you will need to know the graphs to be able to answer, but you're not going to have to submit graphs because they know you can use your book and your notes. Okay. So I'm going to try and kind of do that. I'm going to ask you some verbal questions and you're going to have to answer me. Okay. Anyway, that's what's happening here. Let me see here. Now you don't need to take notes on what I'm showing you here. All right, it won't be open note, and we'll either do it in Zoom or for those of you it doesn't work, we'll try a big blue button. I haven't tried it yet, but a lot of teachers have been using that. Okay, moving on here. And you're just going to answer in your own words. And some of this stuff, like we're going to do liquidity trap later on, some of this stuff is pretty difficult. And so I'm going to do what I've often done in the past, like I did with the buy and the sell and the T-bills. I'm going to give you the big, complicated explanation, then I'm going to give you the short one. And probably what you'll need to give me Thursday is the little short one, but hopefully me giving you the big, deep understanding will help you to be able to get the short one right. That's the plan anyway. All right, so okay, moving on here. Again, you don't need to take notes on this part, but you will eventually. Okay, so here's how I'm going to do Unit 5. Like I said, Unit 5 is very, very difficult. And I used to give a Unit 5 test, and I always had to curve the thing like 40%, 50%, because kids just couldn't pass it. And it was just too much stuff and too complicated. And so what I've done the last couple of years is I've just gone through and picked up the important parts and gone over it. You don't need to take any notes at this point, but you can if you want. For you overachievers out there, those of you, especially as you know now, there's going to be such a big financial crunch because of this coronavirus. I don't want to be a naysayer, doomsday prophet, anything like that. But there's going to be a lot of unemployment. Hopefully, we can bounce back from this thing. But I mean, let's be honest. You're in an economics class. Hopefully, we can bounce back from this thing. But as many classes as you can pass now, this whole situation here should make you more determined to pass your AP exams, because every bit of money that you can save by passing AP exams is going to be good in the long run. And we don't know, what the status of college loans and how much money your parents are going to have to help you. We don't know about that, or bright futures. We don't know anything. So it just seems to me that you ought to try to pass as many AP exams as you can. Obviously, I'm just naturally geared that way anyway, but I hope you are too. And I know a lot of you, you're the smartest kids on campus, so I know you're pretty motivated. But for those of you who are very, very motivated, you can read modules 30 through 34. Let me tell you, they are not fun, even for me. The other stuff is not so bad. There's some pretty tough stuff in here. Anyway, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do these videos highlighting important points. And it may take me 4 or 5 videos to do this. Anyway, I'll be doing several big topics. Some are complicated, some not so much. And it may, there's a typo. It may take me Tuesday and Wednesday to get all the notes out, but I'll try to get them all out tonight. But your notes are going to be due by Thursday morning, and Thursday morning is we're going to do the essays. And so you're going to need to be prepared here. All right. Okay, and to this point, you should start taking notes because you're going to get a grade for your notebook assignment. And by the way, when you're sending me these pictures of your assignments, don't put more than one assignment in the same picture. Because sometimes I'm checking these on my phone and obviously my email is getting clogged up. We may start using Canvas assignments. We'll see. But for right now, let's just do this, okay? All right, so let's talk about inflation targeting. It's a pretty easy concept to start out with. And so what is inflation targeting? Now, obviously, you remember before spring break, we talked about the Federal Reserve, the Fed, Federal Reserve. That is the central bank in the United States. And it is independent of the U.S. government. It's kind of like a quasi-governmental agency. And we talked about that. And the Fed is supposed to be independent. I'm pretty sure that it works like a ambassador, that the President of the United States chooses the Fed chairman and the Senate approves it. I think that's how it works. That will not be on the test. But the theory is that the Federal Reserve is supposed to do what it thinks is right and not so much be worried about politics, although it's probably impossible for someone not to have a political opinion, or it's like me having a religious background. People always say, well, you shouldn't let your religion influence you. And my theory always has been, if your religion doesn't influence you, then you don't have much of a religion. And so the deal is, if you're just a human being, you have political beliefs. But what the Federal Reserve is supposed to do is try to decide what, in their best opinion, is the right thing to do for the American economy. Okay? So anyway, they do this thing called inflation targeting. And what it is they decide how much inflation they want. And an example of this, and of course you're taking notes on all this, in 2012, the Federal Reserve set a 2% target. So a lot of people would say, why does the Federal Reserve, want inflation? Why don't we want zero inflation? I'm not really sure why they want that. I know that I'm sitting here in one of my guest bedrooms. I moved to a different room to get that silly butterfly from behind me. This is a more masculine looking room, I guess. But the deal is, this is the other guest bedroom. But the thing is I think what they want to do is they want there to be a little inflation. I got off topic when I started at my guest bedrooms. This is my house, and I have a house payment on it, and it's a fixed payment. What that means is when I sign the mortgage with the bank, every year my payment is going to be the same every month until the thing is paid off, okay? So what happens is, if there's 2% inflation, how much of a raise should I get every year? At least 2%. And so what that means is that's what should happen. What this means is probably, if I'm getting a 2% raise every year, after 30 years, that's when most mortgages are set for, 30 years. After 30 years, my house payment is not going to be all that big. Because let's say, and this is going to happen to you when you buy your first house. You're going to go out, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the minimum wage is going to be. I don't know what your salary is going to be. Let's just pick some round numbers. Let's say when you graduate from college, you can get a brand new house like you like for $3,000 a month. That is probably going to be very hard for you to afford fresh out of college. Or, but what's going to happen is you go down to the bank and you get your mortgage, and it's $3,000 a month. But if every year there's 2 to 3% inflation, and you get a raise every year, and your house payment stays $3,000, it's possible by the time you're 15 or 20 years into your mortgage, when most people are trying to put kids through college or, get them ready for the college, when you're 15 to 20 years into your mortgage, that $3,000 is not going to be that big. I can tell you that when I financed this house, the house payment was so big, my wife and I were like, how can we possibly make this thing? Now, we've been living here since 2002. We built our home. It is not that big a deal as part of our overall income. It's just not that much. So that is probably why the Federal Reserve wants there to be a 2% inflation rate. And there's two, and the other thing I would say is, if you're making minimum wage and the inflation is 2%, you ought to get a 2% raise every year. Now, as AP macro students, you know that if inflation is 2% and they give you a 2% raise, you haven't gotten a raise at all. You're just breaking even, but it's psychological. And remember, what a lot of these governments want to do is they want to keep, the poor from having, one of these socialist uprisings like they had over in Russia, where they, want to make everybody equal and all that. And they want to kind of, take from the rich and give to the poor. So they want people to think that they're getting a raise when anyone who understands economics knows you're really not. Now, if inflation is 2%, you get a 3% raise. Yes, you really have a raise of 1%. Anyway, there's two advantages to have an inflation targeting policy. Remember, you're taking notes on this. Number one, it's transparent. What that means is, it means that if the government sets a 2% inflation target, I'm sorry, not the government, the Federal Reserve, if they set that, then you know what they're trying to do. I mean, you just understand that's what they want. It's transparent. And number two, it's, gives them accountability. If they set a 2% target and the inflation rate is 10%, obviously they did not do their job very well. And so transparency and accountability are the two reasons or the two advantages to having an inflation targeting policy. Okay. All right, next slide. There's 2 or 3 types of inflation. And number one, and normally AP teachers say there's 2. The reason I'm putting 3, the third one, is Clifford or somebody listed in one of their videos that there were 3 types of inflation. The first type of inflation is called cost push inflation. Okay. And that is caused by a decrease in short run aggregate supply. And it's most likely caused by an economy-wide increase on the cost of resources. All right, so what I want you to do is draw 2 of these on your paper, 2 ADAS graphs. I call them ADSRAS. I know this is crooked looking, but I want you to pause the YouTube video here and draw 2 of these. All right, so the cost push is very confusing for me. The cost push inflation would be something like an increase in the minimum wage, a dramatic increase in the price of oil. And so what would happen was this line here, SRAS, would shift up to the left. So on the first one of your graphs, I want you to draw the arrow going to the left and make this SRAS1 and draw an SRAS2. And that's what causes cost push inflation, a dramatic shift leftward of the short run aggregate supply curve. Okay. All right, the second type of inflation is demand pull inflation, and that is caused by an increase in aggregate demand. Most likely increased by an economic growth with either expansionary fiscal or monetary policy. Now let's go to that second graph you drew. And what you're going to do here now, I have the economy sitting at long run and short run equilibrium. Well, what has happened is either the government has cut taxes or increased government spending, or just consumer demand has gone up. But if demand goes to the right, and I want you to draw that on your second graph, draw an arrow, make this AD1, make your new line appear AD2, and have 2 new intersecting points. All that has happened in this case is aggregate demand has gone up, and that has driven up inflation. And that is the second type. You'll need to know both of these on Thursday. And I may say, if this happens, what kind of inflation does this cause? And the third type of inflation is, again, I always just teach the 2. The third type is hyperinflation. And the reason there's the question mark there is because of, I'm not sure if it's actually a third type of inflation. But hyperinflation happened, obviously, I talked about it before, when Nazi Germany printed money. It happened down in Zimbabwe. And so here's your definition of hyperinflation. It is, rapid, galloping inflation, maybe as much as 1,000% a day. And that is the third type, according to some people, of inflation. And this is the end of the first video.